Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Void podcast. We're so happy to have you with us today, and we have a special guest with a special mission here in Orlando. And Vince, I'll let you introduce.
All right. Well, folks, happy September, and we're back in our home state of Florida, and we're highlighting Maria Cherjovsky, President and CEO of Florida Ability and Inclusion Network. So thank you, Maria, for being here. We're so happy and grateful to have you. So let's just start off and kick it off. Tell us about you.
Well, thank you for having me. Let's start with that. It's been a long journey being here. About myself, I've been in Central Florida for now 26 years. Hard to believe. I have been in the U.S. longer than in my native country of Argentina. I have spent the last 26 years working in academia and nonprofit, developing programs and services to generate opportunities for advancement, self-sufficiency for those who are disadvantaged. And that has been in different roles. I worked at UCF for 20 some years. I was a faculty member at the community colleges. I was the president of the Florida Diversity Council for 7 years, vice president for mission services and workforce innovation for Goodwill Industries of Central Florida, president of the Central Florida Disability Chamber, and now, of course, my role here. So it's been quite a journey, learned a lot, and it's all about giving back.
We're so happy to hear, and you have been busy, that's for sure. You have been busy doing some great work, but you know, I'm personally tied to the predecessor for FAIN. But tell us a little bit specifically about the Florida Ability and Inclusion Network, because that's very intriguing. I love the scope of what you guys do in there. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So like you said, it's a new organization. It's a nonprofit. It was launched technically in late 2019. We kicked off officially for the community in 2020, pre-COVID. So I have to use that as a disclaimer, pre-COVID, because we have had to pivot like everybody else. But the Florida Abilities and Inclusion Network was established, like I said, in 2019. It was part of a strategic realignment of the Central Florida Disability Chamber of Commerce in response to 4 key community needs. Those were compliance, talent acquisition, brand exposure, and lastly, but certainly most important to us and now our key mission, which is a genuine desire to establish and expand diversity and inclusion in in-house efforts for local companies, particularly related to those that pertain to disability inclusion, since disability inclusion is an area that is often overlooked during the D&I discussions.
Wow, such a strategic move and pivot, and understanding you were pre-COVID when you launched in 19. So how is FAIN, the Florida Ability Network, holding up? And what is currently FAIN doing, not just for individuals that are not veterans, but also for veterans?
So our organization is membership-based, which means that we work mostly with local corporations across all industries. And that's one of the areas that we really have been very intentional about post-COVID or during COVID, to make sure that all industries will equally support it, because we support our network of corporate members through advocacy, education, and by providing resources that inform corporate strategies and initiatives that move organizations forward and ultimately become more inclusive, both in the recruitment and retention. So within that, you have quite a gamut, right? You have the networking opportunities, the learning, the advocacy, sharing best practices, consulting services, some very unique and exciting projects that they may need some expertise and assistance with. And all of that tends to happen somewhat behind the scenes, right? Employers want to put the best foot forward, and we're here to become an extension of them and help them become inclusive across all aspects of their organizations. So that is one of the biggest changes between FAIN and CFDC, the Central Florida Disability Chamber. When I took over the organization, as Enrique knows, he was a supporter and speaker for one of our flagship programs, the Veteran Business Initiative, a program that we have kept. Is a legacy program for us now, but that had become the anchor of the organization and what the team and the membership knew us the most for. But there was so much more that was needed. So what I'm sharing with you really was a strategic move that wasn't just something we dreamt up overnight, but it really became from a collective decision that we made holistically while meeting with partners, members, the community, and allowing them to have a say in terms of where we could be of service, where were they struggling, what were their challenges, and how can we lend a helping hand and help them move forward. There's so much more momentum in doing it that way, and we're very appreciative for the candor that has helped carve our own mission and our programmatic portfolio as well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of describing how you take something that was anchored on one and then explode it into different areas. You have done such a great job. It's heartwarming to hear the efforts to the inclusion part of, of those affected by one way or another, and getting them to be an integral part, because we are, even those with some disadvantages or differences are an integral part of our community, and we make
Right.
that community whole. And so I'm glad that you have kept that legacy program alive. I'm intimately involved, not only as a veteran going through the program, but actually a veteran coming back and putting some giving back, right? So
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about the future of FAIN.
So the future is exciting, yet unknown in some ways, right? We are still redefining some of the things we're doing. The pandemic has brought about a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges, the same way that it has for everybody. We have looked at diversifying our programming in clients and industries. One of the things that we were looking to work on later this year, but we had to change priorities, obviously, given what's transpired. We were very heavily involved in tourism and hospitality. And so it became very evident as soon as COVID hit that those markets, they had other priorities. They needed to survive, they needed to sustain, they needed to figure out what the future would hold, how they would reopen, how they would retain their teams. And there's many companies that had really stepped up and found the funds and the means to keep their employees involved, engaged, and with them, and others who have not been as fortunate. And so in looking at that, we needed to also pivot and look at what organizations were ready to keep that momentum, were ready to come and surround and embrace the community, and become a voice for what was happening in society, with all of these recent events and social justice movements. This was not the time to step back and wait for COVID to die down and go away. We were ready to meet the organizations that were ready to move forward. And the other positive thing of the pandemic, if there are some silver linings, we should always look at those, is that we already went from expanding from Central Florida to the state of Florida, but now doing mostly everything virtual. There are no boundaries. So we have expanded our network way beyond the state of Florida, even overseas, with new contacts and collaborations as far as Colombia, the UK, Australia, and looking at some expertise over there, some very innovative things that they have been doing. Again, virtual events with other initiatives on hold. We have been doing more consulting, looking at assisting with different needs and unique projects companies may have as they're designing their own strategies, trying to reposition their efforts. And again, the social justice movements have really contributed a lot with what we're doing. What else can I share? There's a lot. We're still looking for some more assistance. It's been hard to engage committees and volunteers. So that has taken a little bit of a toll. So we look forward to the time where we can once again see people face to face, hug, touch, and celebrate the successes in this new chapter for us. But working with the organizations has been a wonderful blessing, because we get to see what they're doing firsthand. We need to hear the rawness of their own challenges. And I'm not going to call it a cry for help, but I think that this collective grief that we're all going through as a result of COVID has allowed for more candid discussions, a lot more transparency in our feelings and challenges. It has certainly put mental health challenges forward, which is a topic that is always squished down and dealt privately, but now is so widely felt that there was no option but to put it forward, and really have a different dialogue, and allowing individuals who may not have had a voice before have a seat at the table and have us be a partner in that journey is a wonderful thing to watch unfold.
Well, Maria, I'd say I can feel and you're radiating your passion and what you're doing, not just for FAIN, but for the community as a whole. And the fact that the matter that how FAIN was able to pivot and use strategically the silver lining to reach out,
Right.
not only in Florida, but globally. So commend you to reach out UK, Colombia, and Australia, and so on. So it speaks of the volume of your leadership. Hence, we're talking now leadership topics here at the Leadership Void, and you have a plethora of experience in C-suite and different levels of responsibilities. So let me just dive into that first question of leadership. What professional development areas do you work on to improve your capabilities as a leader?
I love that question because it's so tough to answer. And the reason, and what makes it challenging, is that it varies based on what we may be going through as human beings, and we look to improve ourselves. What we're going through personally has a huge impact on our choices. So right now, having gone through leading teams in the hundreds to a very, very small team that you can count with one hand, I have had to engage areas that I used to delegate. So I'm more involved in social media, I'm more involved in technology to really understand how we need to be strategic, how we need to be financially conscious and savvy, how to stretch our dollars for sure. So I'm learning a lot of those technical things that in the past, I had a great team that I could delegate those things to. But on the leadership side, I have, as many people, used this opportunity to learn. I read until the wee hours of the night. I have joined many challenges, training challenges that have been promoted from Tony Robbins and others alike, because how we think, how we process, how we perceive, how we react is not only always evolving as human beings, but more so now when we're all going through a pandemic. I used the term rawness before when it came to companies, but I think that it also applies equally to people. We see the candor, the rawness, the good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes. And so refreshing on any and all of the soft skills is certainly helpful. Understanding that we need to give people space. You know, I go back to empathy. That's something I was sharing with you guys before. Both sympathy for things that may be going on, challenges that people may be facing. A lot of individuals have lost their homes, their jobs. They have lost relatives through this pandemic. So allowing them space and be empathetic versus the we need to deliver, we need to do, we have a job to do. I think that we need to always remember to be people first. That's something that I learned a long time ago in human resources. And when I used to teach those classes, love your employees, love the people. If you care for your people, they will do right by you as well. Business, you can always recover. People, not so much. So that's an area I try to put front and center for myself, for my team, and everybody that I engage with.
That's wonderful to hear, and so happy that you're taking advantage of the different things that are available now, even within the confines of four walls or whatever you may have, to make sure that your sword is sharpened on the leadership platform. There are the leadership ascension has not stopped, right? There are people that are trying to become better leaders, trying to become a leader. What advice would you give them for those that are emerging, right? Because we all came from somewhere. So as we emerge, what advice would you give those emerging leaders that you may have learned?
So I have learned the advice that I have received, I would say, I think that sometimes we need to learn to be more observant. You can learn more by observing interactions, situations, than the actual words spoken. It goes back to body language versus spoken words. But it is so true. I always tell my kids that they probably have more emotional intelligence and situational awareness that I ever had growing up. And that's a skill that I've also had to learn, and I'm still learning. There's times that we get so focused on what we're doing, we forget the surroundings. And so the advice I would give people is always be observing, always look at interactions, look at how people will change their expressions, their eyes. Their eyes are very telling about emotions and how people feel. I learned that you can't take back words. I was the one that would just blurt out what came to mind because let's go, let's do it. And somebody told me a long time ago, ask yourself 3 questions. A, does it need to be said? B, does it need to be said right now? And 3, does it need to be said by you? And I love those 3 questions. I'm not gonna lie, I do not always apply it. I try to remind myself that we all should, but I thought it was so simple, yet so powerful, because once something comes out, you cannot take it back, and that impact is forever lasting. And so that's critical. Another piece of advice would be trust your inner voice. I'm going to date myself here. I'm Gen X. And as a Gen X, I was raised to respect authority. So what my parents said, that was it. Whatever the teacher said, that was it. Whatever the employer said, my boss said, that was it. And in some ways it's true, because we have lost so much of that nowadays, it seems like. But in some other ways, I think that it has squandered people's ideas and the freedoms to feel comfortable in an environment and be or feel in a trusting zone to trust that inner voice and voice your opinions and take chances and allow yourself to make mistakes because you haven't earned the right to do so. Somebody with a greater title, higher title, knows better. That's not always the case. And so that's a piece of advice that I learned not that long ago, I must admit, allowing yourself that opportunity and not always believing that somebody else is right just because they have made it or they have a higher title or the position that they hold. That is not necessarily direct correlation with their abilities and their expertise. So I've learned to listen more, and I tell everybody, feel free to take chances, voice your opinions, don't take everything personally. Life is not fair. I tell my kids the same thing, get over that. But also be the witness. When things don't quite go your way, don't get so involved in it that you become depressed and lost in yourself. Take a step back, look at the bigger picture, assess, and be the witness of how things unfold. And in doing so, you may discover some other opportunities or a viewpoint you may have missed otherwise.
Speaking as a true knowledge from an experienced leader that definitely promotes self-awareness, which I'm hearing a lot about, being more observant and listening, as we spoke about in one of our surveys. The three questions, those are powerful. I thank you for sharing those pearls of wisdom. So great advice. So knowing where you currently are, what challenges do you believe were you most impactful that really you face going through either then or you're facing now, challenges as a leader?
Challenges at the beginning, I think they were more cultural than anything else. Moving to the US in my 20s, coming from a very different cultural environment, there was certainly a cultural shock. And there were a number of situations that really shook me up and, changed how I looked at things. Whether it was, well, let me take a step back. The language barriers were significant. I remember when I first moved here, I enrolled back in college, and a professor, I raised my hand and I wanted to ask a question. And I remember a professor saying, your accent is so heavy, I don't understand what you're asking. I suggest you go back home and read the book. That was hurtful. Not long after that, I accepted a job, and they made it such a big deal. It's like, oh my God, you were a blessing, and exactly what we were looking for. And first week on the job, coming from a female boss, she said to me, love everything about you, but please get rid of your accent. Go to Toastmasters if you want to have a future here. So that dynamic was tough, because my brain and what I brought to the table, that's what people were looking for. But when it came to appearance or the way it sounded, there were some challenges. But as individuals, we're all unique. We come as a package. And it takes me back to when I was doing my doctoral studies. I read a book about assimilation versus acculturation. And I realized that the expectation was you have to assimilate, meaning you have to blend in if you want to succeed. And I took a different approach. I said, no, I think that acculturation is the better approach. I'm not willing to give up my uniqueness. I'm not willing to give up my roots, my origins, my ancestry, my traditions, and my beliefs. But I can adapt and play along and be a contributing member without losing myself. And so that was a challenge for a long time. And I think that when you have cultural differences like that, especially as a young female Hispanic, and I was told before I was being passed for promotions because I was a young female Hispanic, and the role would have been better filled by a Caucasian male. And 20-some years ago, those comments were made openly. Now there will be an uproar, right? So it's wonderful to see how far we have come as a society, and that I don't have to worry about those things anymore, not for myself, not for my teams, not for my colleagues, not for my children. And so the challenges now are maybe not so much about that, because they can voice their opinions and there's systems in place, but looking for a place to belong. A sense of belonging is key for everyone. And I found that with the Diversity Council, whereas it was a compilation of different people, different backgrounds, different beliefs, different ethnicity, different sexual orientation. But at the end of the day, we were all people. And so that helped me as an individual overcome those challenges and not allow myself to lose myself, but instead take the best of myself and become a better version of myself. I can't remember if it was Seminole State College or Valencia, they used to have a slogan that said, be yourself, only better. And I love it. I think they moved past that, but it meant so much if you think of those words. You should always be yourself, just only better. So now that I'm stronger in my own skin, more comfortable in what I am, more secure in what I bring to the table, I'm also a proven concept, right? Proving as a professional. I don't have to work as hard to prove myself. Instead, I can focus on doing what I'm good at, and making a difference, and making sure that giving a hand up. That's another thing I learned. A hand out is short-lived, a hand up is forever. And so I can really focus on taking the best of what I do, surround myself with people that can compliment me, who are going to fill in areas where I may not be as strong because I'm not perfect and I do not know it all, and collectively push forward to build this momentum that is so needed.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that hearing you just brought up a whole lot of things that I dealt with myself. And you realize, when all of these challenges come, and they different for everybody. But like you, I went through the same challenges, and just hearing you kind of makes me realize, man, I lost that guy that left Puerto Rico, or came from the Bronx for the sake of assimilating with the community. But every challenge brings a change, right? It brings change.
Absolutely.
It brought change for me. It brought change to you. And so when we're dealing with change and in terms of leadership, how do you strategize to bring that change to your team and face it head on?
I think that's probably the easiest answer to share, because I think it starts with openness, transparency. When you allow space for people to be who they are, you get the best of them. Because there's so much time wasted and effort spent on pretending, and the facade, and trying to give others what you think they want from you, that you just channeling that energy towards something that is not your calling, your mission, or where your time should be spent. And again, one of those language differences, I always used to say, until somebody corrected me, said there's a better term for that, Maria. I used to say, with me, what you see is what you get. And I realized that in the US, the translation wasn't as positive. In Spanish, it's not a negative thing to say. In English, it has a negative connotation. It means I'm not adaptable, I'm not willing to change. And somebody said, I think what you mean is authenticity. And I learned what that meant, because that's what I related to. And that's how I work with my teams. If I'm having a bad day, if they're having a bad day, if they need time off, they're struggling with someone, let's talk about that. Let's allow them space and room. Why? Because the quicker they can get over that, the quicker they can get back into the rhythm of things and channel that energy. There's also a level of appreciation for a leader that allows you the time and space that you needed, versus work because we have deadlines. I think that you see a different level of commitment. You see people staying with you a lot longer when you see that kind of approach and style. Collaboration's also key. We talk about everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's working, what's not working. Even about me, what can I do differently? How can I help you? How can I support you? Another one that has really worked for me throughout the years is explaining the why. I'm a why kind of person. I was always told the how was my strength, but I think really is the why. If you understand the why of things, the next time something happens, you know what variables to look for and you know how to adapt. This is no different from teaching someone how to fish versus giving them one. And with my kids, I'm doing the same thing. My daughter is now driving, and I don't tell her, well, the driving book says you do this because the book says so. No, in these conditions, given these conditions, so in this environment. So when people know the why, you help them develop, but you also empower them. So the next time something happens, they don't have to run to you for answers and help. They will know how to maneuver. They will know how to succeed. And that's so empowering for me as a leader to know that my team is that resourceful, independent, and they're proud of what they're doing because they don't need to be handheld. Um, I have team members from years ago who, clearly I don't work with anymore, who still call me and say, "Can I run this by you? What am I missing? Let's brainstorm. Can we collaborate on some of these things?" Because that's the kind of dynamic that we developed. And I mentioned before empathy, which I think is key. Um, before forming an opinion, learn to put yourself in people's shoes. What's going to happen, what are they going to react? And that goes back to what I said at the beginning about speaking too soon, speaking too fast, or maybe even wanting to have the final word. Because again, as a young female Hispanic trying to stand out and carve a path for yourself, that's what you do. You're told, speak up, speak up. And I did, and that wasn't always well received. And so I had to learn to balance that with empathy and more so with my team.
Maria, I'm just flabbergasted. What you said, it has so much resonance in what you've mentioned. It's just great to understand and hear you say that. I think being yourself only better, that was key, and your journey and the journey you want to share within your team. You give them time to rumble what they're going through, and I think the operative word that I think you great as leaders, you create trust, and I hear that, and we're just so honored to have you on, and we wish you all the best going
Thank you.
forward for FAIN. And for folks to contact you or to contact FAIN, how would they go about doing so?
So there's multiple ways. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So those 3 social media platforms are great ways to get in touch with us. Our phone number is 407-676-4900. That is our main number. To reach me directly, that will be my first name dot my last name, and I don't know if you guys want to add it at the bottom, at faininc.org. And our website, we have 2, but they converge. So it's Florida Abilities and Inclusion Network.org, or the abbreviated version of it will be faininc.org.
Wonderful. And we'll provide all that information at the bottom of the video and or as part of the comments. So please, folks, if you're listening, you're interested in making sure that you can connect and reach out to Maria, that information will be provided. Also, if you want to contact us, the leadershipvoid@gmail.com is our email. If you want us to sport your shirt, right? I have a nice little Navy program on me today. If you want us to drink out of your mug, we're always available to do so. Sponsorships or any of your participation and comments, you can send it to there.
Yes, and as we continue on this path, we're grateful to have Maria here. We did a pit stop here back at home in Florida, and doing great things. Another great leader here in Central Florida. Wish you all the best, definitely. And we are back on the road next week. We're going northeast. Our next stop is Maryland. We're joined by John Curry, founder of Sempre Savage, which is salad dressing made here in the USA and marinade. So join us September 9th. We look forward to you next week. But for today, we are honored and privileged to have Maria join us and represent FAIN. Thank you so much.
Thank you.